Hey everybody, my name's Mike Montgomery, and today we're going to be installing a DIY rain chain in this really cool ceramic vase. And make sure and stay for part 2 of the video where we're turning it into a water fountain. So let's get started on modern builds. So we recently just got new gutters put in on the income property renovation. That bright white look just freshens everything up. And right here on the corner of the porch, there's nowhere for us to put a downspout unless we decided to corkscrew around this beam and planter. But that really would be an eyesore. And that's why we're gonna be installing a rain chain. The first thing I did is dig out a pretty good size hole. That way I could make a gravel base that'll go underneath our planter. This was about 2 feet wide and maybe 1 foot deep. And FYI, I'm kind of losing my voice here, so my bad on the voiceover. And after tamping down the dirt, I opened up a few bags of river pellets. I picked these up because it was actually cheaper than all-purpose gravel. This took me about 5.5 bags to fill everything up. I ended up going a little bit higher than the dirt line. I knew this would compact down a little bit when I tamped it down with my boots and set the vase on it. And I cannot wait to see this in place. I think I got a pretty decent deal. I bought this at that store called At Home, and it costs 99 bucks, but it's real terracotta or ceramic, whatever. And I just feel like that's gonna be a lot nicer than doing something that's a plastic mold. I ordered the rain chain that I'm using off of Amazon, and I'll make sure and leave links to all of the materials down below. And this warm copper finish is gonna look awesome with that wood stain I've used on the beams and the shutters. I just temporarily dry fit the rain chain in place, that way I could center my vase with where it's gonna eventually be hanging. I also made sure everything was sitting level. Oh, that's perfect. After measuring, I found out that the vase is a 1/2 inch wider in one direction than the other. So I just marked the outline of the vase with a pencil and then hand drew a line about the same width as the wall instead of making a DIY compass. This doesn't need to be perfect anyways, and I just cut it out by hand using my jigsaw. Next, I'll use a 1/2 inch spade bit to drill a hole right in the middle of this plate. This hole is what the rain chain is gonna press into. But here, I'm using my jigsaw to cut a bigger hole so that the flowers of the rain chain can actually feed through this plate. In this shot, you can see how our vase is a little oblong shaped, but that's actually fine. We'll be able to rotate the plate and that'll lock it in place. And I also hot glued some wood blocks in as some extra positive stops. And now the rain chain should be able to feed through the big hole, but then be centered right here in the smaller one that we drilled. That worked great, and now we can backfill this with some stones. This vase had a really big drainage hole right in the middle, but I added some more with an 1/8 inch masonry bit just to show you guys how you could do it in case you've got a vase with no drainage in it at all. I added a bag of rocks to the bottom of this vase just to make sure that it wouldn't be too top heavy, and then I reinserted the wooden plate. For the top layer, I'm gonna be using a few bags of these larger creek stones. I used a couple of big pieces to plug up the holes around the plywood, then I backfilled some of the space with these more affordable pebbles. In this upcoming shot, you can see the color difference between the creek stones and the pebbles that I was using, and I really like this lighter color. It really matches the color tone of the pavers that you can see in the background. And I didn't do anything fancy around the base or the perimeter of the vase. I just dressed it up similar to the top. Then I took down my chain, that way I could get my flashing piece and install it with some heavy-duty outdoor rated silicone. I applied a pretty heavy bead around the perimeter of this downspout. I wanted to make sure and get a good seal, and no one's ever gonna see this from the top of the gutter anyways. It dropped into place easy enough, and then I got down off the roof to make sure it was centered before applying more silicone. I wasn't kidding when I said I went pretty heavy. Now I could reattach my rain chain, and this actually put quite a bit of downward pressure and gave me a little bit of squeeze out. Basically, it was clamping that downspout in place, which was awesome. And FYI, if you're using silicone caulk, mineral spirits is what you want to use to clean it up. And now it's time to test everything out. We're not waiting for rain. At first, because I was spraying on the right side of the roof, it was coming off center, but once I started spraying to the left as well, it started working properly. There we go. I absolutely love this flower petal design, and it's neat the way that it keeps the water all centered on the chain. That's so cool. While I was prepping and brainstorming for this project, I had a really neat idea. I could turn this DIY rain chain into a water fountain. But first, I'd like to give a big thanks to the sponsor of today's episode, Squarespace. If you need a website or an online store, why not build it yourself? And now, with Blueprint AI, you can start with a completely personalized website for your brand or business. And from there, editing and tailoring that site is easy with their enhanced drag and drop technology. And with Squarespace's search engine optimization, customers can find your site even easier. There are also no limits to the number of products you can sell in a Squarespace store, and customers have really flexible payment options. Online, they can use credit cards, PayPal, and Apple Pay, and now in eligible countries, customers can buy now and pay later using ClearPay and Afterpay. And the last thing I want to talk about are Squarespace online courses. With Squarespace, you've got the tools to turn your knowledge into income. Online, you can create your course, then you can set your paywall and choose whether it's a one-time fee or a recurring subscription charge. So to learn more, make sure and follow my link down in the description. That's squarespace.com/modernbuilds. And then when it's time to make your site live, don't forget to use my code ModernBuilds for 10% off your first site, store, or custom domain through Squarespace. As always, big thanks to Squarespace and you all for watching. And now let's add a water fountain to this rain chain. And the first step is to take this apart. I knew I was going to be doing this though, so I kept all of the bags in really good condition so I could reuse them through this project. I pushed all of the small pebbles through the hole in my plywood plate, and then I scooped them out into bags with this bucket. Here's a quick time lapse, but it really only took a couple of minutes. The bagged rocks ended up being surprisingly dirty, so I cleaned them before I reused them. I also washed out the vase. To turn this into a water fountain, I'm gonna need to plug up all of these holes in the bottom. And I got a variety cork set, and I used this big one along with some silicone on the bottom to make sure I sealed that big drainage hole. And I used more of the same silicone to plug up all of those small 1/8" holes that we drilled earlier. The solar pump kit that I'm using was about 30 bucks, and it's got some basic components, but the pump itself is really small. But it does include a pretty decent sized solar panel. I'm using a 1/2" masonry drill bit to make a hole for the power cable that feeds from the pump to the solar panel. In general, if you do this, make the hole as small as possible, and that's what I did. It's basically the same size as the connector. And I applied a whole bunch of silicone to this hole to plug it up, especially since the cable is smaller than the connector. There's quite a bit of negative space that this silicone is filling. The kit includes about 4 feet of this 1/2" outside diameter, 3/8" inside diameter clear tubing. And here I'm just seeing how long I need the tube to be. And instead of just one outlet, I'm gonna drill 2 holes in this plate. I thought it would be pretty cool if I could have water spraying from 2 different sides of the rain chain. So from Home Depot, I picked up a 3/8" T or splitter. That way I could have 2 separate lines feeding from the pump. This was all straightforward to connect, and then I just fed it through our plywood plate. You all are probably getting pretty familiar with this process of getting the chain locked into the plywood and then just throwing in some pebbles as a base and then more of those creek stones as the visual top layer. I really enjoyed doing this, making it look good yet natural, and then concealing the tubing. I'm still not sure exactly how much water pressure there's gonna be, so I'm just gonna kind of hide them in here for now before we test it out. This came with a pretty good sized solar panel, and it's got a battery on the back, so I think it's supposed to work overnight. I'm gonna go ahead and plug this in, and don't worry, the pump won't run unless there's water. All right, let's see if this works. Oh look, here it comes. It's starting to work. I'll put a couple arrows on the screen so you can see our 2 spouts, but unfortunately, we are just not getting enough water pressure to create a good fountain effect. I knew I would need to do a little inspecting, so I removed some rocks before I checked the water pressure after kinking one of the hoses. And I was kind of shocked to see how much more water pressure there was. I mean, that's exactly what we're looking for. So I went ahead and just removed that second line completely and directly attached one line to the pump. I also switched out the nozzle for this cool shower head, which I think looks better and sounds nicer. Finally, I could throw the creek stones back in and position the spray head so that it's hitting the rain chain. At this point in the project, we are 95% of the way complete, but I did need to get 1 or 2 quick beauty shots because this just looks too good. After staking in my solar panel, I made an overflow drain towards the top of the vase, and I used the water from the fountain to keep the bit cool. I thought that was pretty neat. And finally, I just cleaned everything up. And now we're done. Let's see it in action. This project was honestly so fun for me. It was killer being able to combine a creative project with something that was just a necessity, something that needed to be done for the house functionally. The rain chain itself works great, and the drainage is going to be awesome with the additional gutters and downspouts as well. But I'm also curious what you think. Let me know in the comments down below. When it's raining, I think it's going to be killer, but when someone's just sitting on the porch, they can hear the water fountain noise also. The overflow works. I went about an inch down, maybe 3/4, but I would recommend it. That looks awesome. And birds will probably like it too. So honestly, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I really wanted to take it to the next step. That way it was a certified banger. If you're not already, make sure and click like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Modern Builds. Or Mike's first flip. I mean, really, it's still Mike's first flip. It's Mike's first flip. It's the perfect storm.
It's a perfect storm, man.